The Missile Command Center hummed with routine monitoring until Colonel Mitchell's voice cracked with recognition. "Stop everything immediately," he commanded, his usual authority shattered by disbelief. The unassuming woman in civilian clothes looked up from her technical console as 18 words changed everything. The effect was immediate. The launch control officer's authentication key froze mid-turn. Senior operators stared at their stations and faces drained of color throughout the underground facility. No one had expected the contractor technician to possess nuclear launch authorization. No one had expected the woman dismissed as low-level support to carry the most classified codes in the military. No one had expected the truth. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If this story captivated you, please consider subscribing. We share powerful stories of unsung heroes every week. The underground nuclear command facility buzzed with the constant hum of missile monitoring systems and urgent strategic communications. Banks of launch control displays cast red light across focused faces, illuminating status screens dotted with green ready indicators and amber standby signals. The air carried the scent of strong coffee and advanced electronics, mixed with the tension that came with maintaining nuclear deterrent capability during heightened global tensions. It was 0800 hours on what had begun as a routine readiness drill at Strategic Command Underground Complex Bravo, buried beneath the Colorado mountains. Dr. Jessica Chen sat at her assigned technical support workstation, deliberately positioned away from the main launch control section. Her black hair was pulled back in a casual style, no military insignia visible on her civilian contractor clothing. Late 20s, with steady hands that spoke of technical precision rather than military experience. Her attention moved constantly between multiple system diagnostic displays and maintenance equipment, while her physical presence was carefully minimized in the military-dominated command environment. To a casual observer, she might have been any civilian contractor, a recent graduate from technical school perhaps, or another specialist assigned to maintain equipment while remaining distant from actual nuclear operations. She occasionally made entries in a technical maintenance log, her work methodical and largely invisible to the launch control staff. Unlike the missile officers and senior technicians who dominated the command center with their nuclear warfare qualifications and operational expertise, she wore no visible markers of strategic weapons experience or security clearances. Just a technical contractor, it seemed, with specialized electronics training and an assignment to support equipment maintenance while remaining separate from actual launch operations. The operation underway involved conducting emergency readiness procedures for Nuclear Alert Status Charlie, testing all systems and personnel responses during simulated crisis scenarios. The drill had proceeded according to established protocols: alert status elevated, launch systems activated, and command authorization verified through various security levels. Major Harrison, a veteran missile officer with multiple strategic command credentials, coordinated the readiness operations with practiced efficiency, moving between launch stations and monitoring system status throughout the underground facility. Nuclear launch procedures had precise authentication requirements to follow regarding command authority, Harrison explained to the launch team, his voice carrying across the sophisticated command center. Their protocols for conducting launch sequences strictly follow established strategic weapons doctrine and security precedent. Colonel Mitchell sat prominently at the primary command console, his face reflecting the intensity of nuclear command responsibility. A career strategic weapons officer with 24 years of service, he appeared focused and determined in his service dress blue uniform, as if the complexity of coordinating nuclear deterrent operations had heightened his command awareness during recent exercises. Jessica watched it all from her isolated support station, her expression revealing nothing. Only the occasional adjustment of her diagnostic equipment suggested any emotional response to the ongoing nuclear operations. When Major Harrison called for system status verification, heads turned briefly toward Jessica's position at the technical support station. Dr. Chen has been monitoring system diagnostics, Major Harrison announced. She may have additional technical data on equipment performance and operational parameters. She approached the central command area with measured technical professionalism that seemed at odds with her contractor support assignment. Something about her movement, bearing confident, steps purposeful, eyes constantly evaluating the launch displays, caught the attention of a distinguished Chief Master Sergeant seated near the main command console. He observed her with growing interest, noting details that didn't quite align with typical contractor technician profiles. Colonel Mitchell, authoritative and demanding, watched her with narrowed attention as she prepared her technical report. The colonel was known for his direct approach to nuclear operations and security efficiency. Today, he wore command authority with intensity, his uniform bearing the ribbons of previous strategic command operations. "Present your system diagnostic assessment for the record," instructed Colonel Mitchell. "Dr. Jessica Chen, technical systems contractor," she replied. Her voice was quiet but precise, her professional bearing evident despite civilian clothing. Major Harrison began his technical questions, and Jessica's responses were technically sophisticated and detailed, but delivered in such a controlled, measured tone that Colonel Mitchell soon grew visibly impatient. Several times, launch personnel had to ask her to clarify system terminology. "Dr. Chen," Colonel Mitchell finally interrupted. "The entire launch control team needs to understand your diagnostic data clearly. Explain your findings in operational terms." "Yes, sir," Jessica responded, barely adjusting her technical vocabulary. Major Harrison continued. "Dr. Chen, can you explain your system monitoring activities and diagnostic analysis procedures? I've been conducting comprehensive analysis of launch control systems using advanced diagnostic equipment," she replied, her voice still frustratingly technical. "I've identified multiple system performance patterns and operational capabilities across various missile platforms and command interfaces." "And what technical patterns have your systems detected?" "I've documented baseline system patterns consistent with established nuclear command procedures and standard operational protocols. Significant anomalies detected in specific authentication sequences that suggest enhanced security capability beyond normal launch control parameters. Advanced diagnostic analysis indicates sophisticated command authentication using military-grade security technology. Have you documented these system findings?" "Yes. I've created comprehensive technical archives of all diagnostic data with detailed system analysis and performance correlation according to established contractor documentation protocols." "Was this system analysis distributed to launch control teams?" "It was processed through appropriate technical channels per standard contractor reporting procedures." The Strategic Weapons Coordinator, Lieutenant Colonel Davis, approached for additional questioning with obvious skepticism about technical analysis from contractor support personnel. Tall and imposing with extensive nuclear warfare ribbons that reflected specialized experience, he moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to evaluating technical reports from civilian support staff. "Dr. Chen, what specific training qualifies you to analyze complex nuclear launch system authentication patterns?" "I completed advanced nuclear systems training at the Department of Energy Technical Institute, including strategic weapons analysis and advanced security authentication courses." "And what level of operational nuclear experience?" His tone clearly suggested the answer would confirm her limited operational credentials. "I achieved expert-level certification in multiple nuclear systems platforms and strategic weapons analysis systems," Jessica responded professionally. Lieutenant Colonel Davis smiled dismissively. "Dr. Chen, how could you possibly understand the operational complexities of nuclear command when you've been maintaining contractor systems for only 18 months? Something flickered across Colonel Mitchell's face. A brief moment of recognition quickly suppressed. He studied Jessica more carefully now, noting technical details he had previously overlooked. "Sir," respectfully, Major Harrison interjected. "Dr. Chen's system analysis should be evaluated based on the quality of her diagnostic data, not assumptions about her operational background." "Agreed," Colonel Mitchell replied, his eyes remaining focused on Jessica with renewed interest. Lieutenant Colonel Davis adjusted his approach. "Let me rephrase. What direct nuclear command experience do you have that would qualify you to assess operational threats from launch system authentication analysis?" Jessica paused before answering, her eyes briefly meeting those of the distinguished Chief Master Sergeant near the command console. "My background includes some practical application of authentication techniques in operational nuclear command environments," she said carefully. "Could you be more specific about this nuclear command experience?" "That information involves previous assignments that may not be directly relevant to current contractor parameters." Lieutenant Colonel Davis looked toward the commanding officer. Sir, if the contractor lacks relevant nuclear command experience, her interpretation of authentication systems should be weighted accordingly in our operational assessments. I'll allow continued questioning, Colonel Mitchell ruled. Dr. Chen, please provide more detail about your relevant operational background. Jessica's expression remained neutral. My previous operational experience involves classified nuclear authentication programs. How convenient, Lieutenant Colonel Davis remarked sarcastically. So we're expected to give operational weight to your system analysis without knowing your actual qualifications to make such nuclear command assessments? I'm providing technical analysis of authentication systems using established nuclear command protocols and strategic weapons procedures. As the questioning continued, Jessica responded with increasingly sophisticated details about advanced nuclear authentication techniques, strategic weapons system recognition, and operational command analysis that made several launch control officers exchange meaningful glances. She referenced specific authentication capabilities, command verification procedures, and operational nuclear methods that seemed well beyond the knowledge base of a standard contractor technician. When shown a command display of the current nuclear readiness configuration, her eyes studied it with intensity that suggested deeper familiarity, her professional composure revealing subtle signs of personal investment in the operational outcome. Do you recognize specific technical elements of this nuclear command configuration, Dr. Chen? Lieutenant Colonel Davis asked. Yes, it represents the current strategic command readiness posture for Alert Status Charlie, with particular emphasis on launch authentication and command verification capabilities. And your system diagnostic analysis of this configuration has confirmed what exactly? Your technical analysis hasn't identified any operational requirements that would alter our current nuclear command procedures. Jessica's voice remained steady and professional. My authentication system analysis has documented baseline command patterns and technical indicators. My recommendations for enhanced system monitoring of specific authentication parameters were included in my formal contractor reports. In the Nuclear Command Center, the older Chief Master Sergeant with extensive strategic weapons deployment experience watched Jessica with growing intensity, his weathered face reflecting concentration as if trying to place half-remembered details from previous classified operations. The morning hours passed as Major Harrison returned for follow-up questions, asking Jessica about specific authentication protocols used during the nuclear readiness operations. Can you explain the standard system diagnostic procedures for a nuclear command operation of this scope? Harrison asked. The authentication systems would establish primary and secondary verification networks covering all designated launch protocols, she explained, her voice maintaining that technical precision. Standard procedures require continuous system analysis with redundant authentication platforms and regular security assessment updates to command authorities. And if those authentication systems detected unexpected command signatures or operational changes, the system operators would immediately alert command authorities using priority authentication channels and reconfigure verification systems to provide enhanced security against unauthorized launch commands, she explained with a level of nuclear command sophistication that raised eyebrows among the launch control team present. Colonel Mitchell leaned forward, his patience with technical jargon wearing visibly thin. Dr. Chen, I've asked you repeatedly to communicate in terms relevant to nuclear operations. This command center cannot effectively utilize system analysis that requires constant technical interpretation. I apologize, sir, Jessica replied, her communication style barely becoming less technical. The older Chief Master Sergeant in the command center now leaned forward at his position, his eyes never leaving Jessica's face, recognition seeming to dawn slowly, his expression shifting from casual interest to something approaching amazement. Lieutenant Colonel Davis seized on the colonel's frustration. Perhaps Dr. Chen's reliance on technical terminology reflects her limited understanding of how system analysis actually applies to operational nuclear command and strategic weapons security. Major Harrison responded immediately. Sir, that's an unfair characterization of the contractor's system expertise and authentication capabilities. Noted, Major, Colonel Mitchell replied firmly. Lieutenant Colonel Davis, please focus your questions on the contractor's system findings rather than speculating about her nuclear command capabilities. Lieutenant Colonel Davis nodded in acknowledgement. Dr. Chen, in your professional assessment as a technical systems contractor, was there anything in your diagnostic analysis that would indicate modification of current nuclear command procedures? Jessica looked directly at the main command display for the first time during the briefing. My system analysis suggests authentication patterns and technical indicators that warrant enhanced operational awareness. That wasn't my specific question. Based on what your diagnostic systems detected, should current nuclear command operations continue as planned? Based on my technical analysis of authentication data, current operations should continue, but with modifications to verification protocols in specific command sectors. Lieutenant Colonel Davis's expression hardened. Are you suggesting that launch control teams have inadequately assessed system authentication requirements? I'm stating that my technical recommendations for enhanced system analysis of specific authentication signatures differed from the verification parameters actually implemented for this operation. The command center stirred with quiet nuclear discussion. Colonel Mitchell tapped his pen once against his console, restoring order. Dr. Chen, Colonel Mitchell said, his voice carrying obvious impatience. You need to explain that system assessment in practical terms the entire command team can understand. What specific authentication signatures require different system analysis? Jessica paused, her eyes scanning the command center briefly before returning to the colonel. When she spoke, her voice maintained that technical precision, forcing command staff officers to pay closer attention. My system analysis identified authentication patterns in verification sectors 7 Alpha through 12 Charlie that exhibit characteristics requiring enhanced security assessment beyond standard nuclear command parameters. These signatures were not included in the primary system monitoring tasking provided to technical contractor operations. Colonel Mitchell's head lifted, his carefully maintained command focus sharpening dramatically. The distinguished Chief Master Sergeant's expression showed growing recognition as he studied Jessica with renewed intensity. Dr. Chen, Colonel Mitchell said firmly, operational urgency evident in his tone. This represents potentially critical nuclear intelligence. Explain clearly what your diagnostic systems detected in those verification sectors. Jessica looked directly at Colonel Mitchell. A moment of quiet recognition seemed to pass between them, though the colonel quickly returned to professional command demeanor. The experienced Chief Master Sergeant in the command center was now gripping his authentication materials, his knuckles showing white. Colonel Mitchell leaned forward with visible concern at his nuclear console. Dr. Chen, we have active nuclear command operations right now. If your system analysis detected something significant about authentication, anomalies, reported immediately. The command center fell silent. For the first time since beginning her technical briefing, Jessica looked directly at Colonel Mitchell with unmistakable urgency. The quiet recognition between them became more evident, though the colonel maintained his command composure. The experienced Chief Master Sergeant near the command console leaned forward, his hands ready at his authentication equipment. Suddenly, urgent alert sirens activated throughout the main nuclear system. The Strategic Command Headquarters reported unauthorized authentication attempts detected on multiple command channels, with security signatures that matched Jessica's diagnostic analysis. The alert was brief, urgent, and accompanied by immediate security protocols throughout the facility. All stations, this is Nuclear Command. Colonel Mitchell called over the emergency frequency. Confirm authentication security status immediately. The command center filled with overlapping priority reports as various security systems tried to provide authentication verification. The situation was critical, with unauthorized access attempts targeting nuclear command systems exactly as detected by Jessica's system analysis. Jessica leaned toward her diagnostic equipment and spoke clearly over the emergency frequency. Nuclear Command. This is authentication analysis. I have confirmed detection of unauthorized command access using advanced signature masking. Authentication sectors 7 Alpha through 12 Charlie show penetration attempts utilizing classified nuclear codes. Security assessment indicates hostile access to strategic weapons authentication systems. The effect was immediate and electric. Colonel Mitchell's command materials nearly slipped from his grasp. Several staff officers physically straightened at their positions, as if receiving critical operational intelligence. Lieutenant Colonel Davis's face showed complete shock. The distinguished Chief Master Sergeant near the command console stood up quickly, then deliberately sat back down with recognition evident in his expression. Complete silence fell over the command center as understanding dawned across various faces. Some looked confused by the sudden authentication expertise. Others appeared shocked by the authority in her voice, and a few, those who grasped the significance of what they had just witnessed, seemed stunned. Jessica continued in her normal controlled voice, but now everyone was listening intently. That authentication analysis was accomplished using advanced security techniques and classified nuclear identification capabilities I learned during my deployment with the Department of Defense's Special Operations Nuclear Security Teams 12 years ago. I was also the lead authentication specialist attached to Project Deep Shield, which Colonel Mitchell personally supervised during classified operations before our program was restructured. She systematically activated multiple authentication analysis systems on the main display screens and demonstrated them for the command staff to observe. These are real-time security penetration feeds showing the hostile access attempts that would have compromised nuclear command systems using advanced authentication countermeasures. The unauthorized access wasn't randomly attempted. It was using sophisticated security technology and classified intelligence about our nuclear command authentication patterns. Colonel Mitchell attempted to maintain operational composure, but his voice carried obvious recognition. Dr. Chen, this represents a significant departure from standard contractor procedures. My team and I were reassigned to civilian contractor positions after Project Deep Shield was classified and restructured 12 years ago. Jessica continued calmly. I've spent the last 8 years working under contractor cover while waiting for another situation where my specialized nuclear security training could prevent authentication failures that compromise American strategic weapons systems. A younger launch operator near the authentication console looked up with confusion. This doesn't make sense. Project Deep Shield's nuclear specialists were all reported as transferred to different assignments after that program was restructured. The distinguished Chief Master Sergeant turned to address him quietly. Look at her authentication techniques, Airman. Look at how she's coordinating those security systems. You don't learn that level of nuclear command identification in regular technical school. Jessica activated additional authentication displays to reveal detailed information about hostile nuclear penetration capabilities, security countermeasure effectiveness, and operational authentication techniques that had been invisible using conventional security methods. My previous unit was restructured because we discovered that enemy forces were obtaining American nuclear authentication capabilities through defense contractors who were supposed to be supporting our security system development. The command center erupted into controlled nuclear activity as staff officers began coordinating immediate security responses. Colonel Mitchell activated emergency authentication protocols, his face showing a combination of shock and professional determination. This nuclear command center will implement immediate security procedures, he declared, his voice steady despite obvious emotional impact. But before anyone could fully process the implications, Jessica continued. Sir, this authentication penetration has been coordinated using leaked intelligence about our nuclear security limitations. I've spent 8 years analyzing similar security breaches and gathering evidence about the capability transfers that led to my unit's restructuring. This represents the same operational pattern, same authentication methods, same systematic betrayal. Colonel Mitchell slowly turned in his nuclear command chair, his operational authority visibly affected by recognition. He nodded once, a gesture of acknowledgement and renewed professional trust. Project Deep Shield was classified above top secret, Jessica continued. Our mission involved developing nuclear authentication capabilities against enemy penetration systems and advanced security warfare techniques. We discovered that our authentication identification technology was being systematically compromised by someone with access to our development programs. Someone who was selling our security capabilities to the same enemy forces we were supposed to be defending against. She activated her authentication control systems and displayed an encrypted data storage device. This contains 12 years of nuclear security data, authentication identification techniques, and operational security documentation that proves how our defensive capabilities were being systematically betrayed. This penetration attempt wasn't successful because of superior enemy technology. It was detected because someone finally implemented proper authentication analysis based on classified capabilities that weren't supposed to be compromised. Lieutenant Colonel Davis attempted to restore normal nuclear briefing procedures, but found himself struggling with the operational security implications. Dr. Chen, this represents highly irregular authentication intelligence reporting procedures. My unit was restructured and scattered to prevent us from investigating the capability transfers further. Jessica continued with professional calm. I was the designated nuclear specialist who maintained all our authentication development data and operational security documentation. I've spent 8 years working in contractor assignments while waiting for the right opportunity to expose the source of those capability compromises and prevent enemy forces from using our own nuclear intelligence against American strategic weapons systems. Major Harrison approached Jessica with obvious concern and growing professional respect. Specialist Shield, if what you're reporting is accurate, how did you maintain access to classified nuclear authentication capabilities, and why choose this penetration attempt to reveal your background? Jessica's professional composure never wavered. I maintained access because I never officially left nuclear authentication operations. My assignment to contractor technical support was supposed to be temporary cover while Project Deep Shield investigated the capability transfers. When the investigation was terminated and the unit restructured, I continued developing countermeasures using my legitimate access to authentication systems. She indicated the real-time authentication feeds showing successful penetration detection coordination. I chose this moment because enemy forces just attempted to penetrate our nuclear command systems using authentication technology that was stolen from American development programs. If this penetration had succeeded, our strategic weapons systems would have been compromised because of security failures that could have been prevented. The distinguished Chief Master Sergeant approached the briefing area. Sir, request permission to address the nuclear staff. I am Chief Master Sergeant Harrison, recently returned from assignment with nuclear security operations. I worked with Project Deep Shield during their classified authentication development programs. He turned to face Jessica. Specialist Shield was one of the most skilled nuclear authentication operators I encountered during my career. If she reports that this penetration involved compromised American technology, I believe her assessment without question. Lieutenant Colonel Davis interjected with growing frustration. This is highly irregular, but it doesn't change the immediate security situation we're managing. This nuclear command center needs continued authentication protection regardless of any alleged capability compromises. The situations are directly connected, Jessica replied. This penetration attempt was specifically coordinated using stolen American nuclear authentication intelligence while simultaneously testing the same capability transfer network that my unit was investigating. Same operational pattern, same authentication countermeasures, same systematic betrayal. She activated additional authentication data on her control systems. This is nuclear intelligence showing that enemy forces received advanced notification of our security capabilities, authentication procedures, and verification limitations. The source of that capability leak is the same defense contracting network that compromised Project Deep Shield's operations 12 years ago. Colonel Mitchell studied the authentication displays, his command authority gradually returning as he processed the operational security intelligence. This nuclear intelligence wasn't included in our pre-deployment security briefing because it was deliberately removed by the same people who have been compromising our nuclear authentication operations, Jessica said. Just like the security identification capabilities my unit developed were altered before reaching operational commanders. The pattern is identical because the source is identical. The command center had grown absolutely focused. Every person present understood they were witnessing something extraordinary while simultaneously managing immediate implications for ongoing nuclear defense operations. Even the authentication operators had prioritized Jessica's security updates while maintaining emergency coordination with defensive systems. Major Harrison approached the nuclear console. Sir, based on this new intelligence, I recommend immediate modification of our security response and potentially reassessing how this entire operation's nuclear authentication was planned and coordinated. Colonel Mitchell nodded with restored operational confidence. Agreed. All security responses will be modified immediately based on current authentication assessments. He paused, then added, Specialist Shield will remain integrated with nuclear operations until this operational security situation is completely resolved. As staff officers coordinated the security response, Jessica continued her authentication briefing. There's additional information you need to understand, sir. She accessed a secured file on her authentication system. This contains the original security capabilities assessment for this deployment with your authorization signature. And this, she displayed another document, is the modified nuclear briefing that was actually implemented. The authentication assessments don't match. Colonel Mitchell examined both documents with obvious shock. Someone altered the nuclear security briefing after I approved it, he said, recognition and anger evident in his voice. Yes, Jessica confirmed. You've been carrying operational responsibility for security decisions based on compromised authentication assessments you never actually authorized. The same defense contracting network that destroyed Project Deep Shield has been systematically altering nuclear intelligence to serve enemy interests while profiting from capability transfers. Chief Master Sergeant Harrison moved closer to the display. I always wondered why certain nuclear operations seem to face unexpected authentication attack capabilities. This explains security problems we've been encountering across multiple strategic weapons deployments. Colonel Mitchell looked up, professional determination overriding emotional impact. I've been commanding nuclear operations for 8 years, believing my authentication assessments were reaching operational units accurately. I authorized security plans, but someone has been systematically modifying them to serve hostile interests. The command center entrance opened, and a team of nuclear security investigators entered, led by a serious-looking official from the Department of Energy Office of Intelligence and Counterintelligence. What's the status of this nuclear security emergency? The official demanded. Colonel Mitchell, I'm Special Agent Martinez from DOE Counterintelligence. We received credible intelligence yesterday indicating serious operational security breaches involving defense contractors and nuclear authentication capability transfers to hostile forces. We understand there may be connected nuclear security intelligence being reported in this command center. Jessica allowed herself a slight smile. Exactly on schedule, she said quietly. Special Agent Martinez approached her position. You would be Specialist Shield, formerly of Project Deep Shield. I would be. We have extensive questions about your nuclear authentication activities and the evidence you've been collecting regarding capability transfers to enemy forces. And I have comprehensive answers, Agent. 12 years of documentation. The agent addressed Colonel Mitchell. Sir, with your permission, I'd like to coordinate with your nuclear operations while securing the intelligence Specialist Shield has provided for formal counterintelligence investigation. Colonel Mitchell nodded decisively. Granted, but our immediate priority is determining the operational security implications for current and future nuclear command operations. Understood completely, sir. Our investigation supports rather than interferes with nuclear operations and authentication security. The command center began reorganizing around both the nuclear coordination and the security investigation, but Jessica remained integrated with the operational response rather than isolated from it. Colonel Mitchell approached her directly. I still don't understand the complete operational picture, he said, looking directly at her authentication displays. Why would you risk exposure to coordinate today's defense? Your contractor assignment provided security while you gathered evidence about capability transfers. Because enemy forces just attempted to penetrate our nuclear command systems using stolen American authentication technology, Jessica replied simply. You trusted my nuclear assessments during Project Deep Shield operations. You implemented security plans based on my authentication data because you knew it was accurate and professionally developed. How can you be certain I wasn't involved in the capability transfers that destroyed your unit? Jessica displayed a quiet smile and rolled up her sleeve, revealing a complex numerical tattoo on her forearm. Because I've spent 12 years analyzing every detail of what happened to my nuclear authentication unit. I know who altered security assessments and who profited from selling authentication capabilities to enemy forces. Most importantly, I know you requested verification of nuclear reports multiple times because you suspected something was wrong with the security development process. The room fell completely silent as everyone stared at the tattoo on Jessica's arm. The numbers were unmistakably nuclear launch codes, the most classified authentication sequence in the American military. Colonel Mitchell's expression showed profound recognition. How could you possibly know about those verification requests? Those nuclear communications were classified at the highest levels. And that tattoo. The authentication codes tattooed on my arm are the master verification sequence for Project Deep Shield, Jessica explained. Only 5 people in the entire military were authorized to carry these codes. I had them permanently marked on my body to ensure they could never be stolen or compromised through normal intelligence channels. I had assistance from people within the nuclear authentication community who weren't compromised, she admitted. Not everyone involved in security development was participating in the capability transfers. There are still professional service members within the system who wanted the truth exposed and who wanted to prevent nuclear operations from being betrayed because of systematic authentication compromise. The command center remained silent as everyone processed the implications of the nuclear launch codes tattooed on Jessica's arm, codes that had just appeared on their authentication screens during the security breach. As she prepared to coordinate both nuclear conclusion and evidence transfer, Chief Master Sergeant Harrison approached. "Specialist," he said with formal respect, then dropped his voice. "Jessica, we thought you had been safely transferred after Project Deep Shield was restructured." "I know," she replied quietly, covering the tattoo with her sleeve. "I maintained that contractor cover while continuing the investigation we started. Thank you for trusting my nuclear assessments. What happens to nuclear defensive operations now?" Jessica indicated her authentication displays showing real-time nuclear coordination. "Now we develop nuclear security based on accurate authentication assessments and proper operational security. Nuclear command can finally proceed with confidence because someone exposed the systematic capability betrayal." The command center remained focused on nuclear implications while simultaneously processing the broader scope of systematic capability transfers to enemy forces. Colonel Mitchell coordinated effective nuclear responses while Special Agent Martinez secured evidence for formal counterintelligence investigation. Jessica stood with the nuclear staff who had unknowingly been working with compromised authentication capabilities for years. From her authentication equipment, she retrieved carefully preserved operational records from Project Deep Shield, nuclear security techniques, authentication data, verification effectiveness reports, operational security documentation, and presented them to the appropriate staff members who had been struggling with inconsistent nuclear intelligence reports. They maintained professional standards until the end, she told them, referring to her former nuclear authentication unit members. They never compromised their security development even when they realized our capabilities were being systematically sold to enemy forces. A nuclear command officer who had processed authentication reports from multiple nuclear operations held one of the data storage devices carefully. "These nuclear security techniques were always more sophisticated than anything we received from regular nuclear channels," he said with growing understanding. "They trained me to maintain the highest professional standards," Jessica said quietly. "Everything I've done for the past 12 years was to honor their professional dedication and ensure nuclear operations wouldn't be betrayed because of the same capability transfers." As nuclear staff coordinated security planning with restored confidence in their authentication assessments, Colonel Mitchell approached once more. "Specialist Shield, the Pentagon will want comprehensive briefings about both your evidence and the nuclear authentication compromises you've documented." Jessica nodded. "I'm prepared for that. But first, nuclear operations need to proceed based on accurate authentication capabilities and proper operational security. And the military operations that might be at risk from other compromised nuclear authentication capabilities? The evidence I've provided should allow you to identify which nuclear operations and authentication assessments have been systematically compromised by the same capability transfer network," Jessica replied with professional certainty. "Every nuclear operation deserves accurate authentication support and proper operational security." Lieutenant Colonel Davis approached with obvious concern. "I still struggle to understand how you can be certain those of us who unknowingly used compromised nuclear capabilities weren't deliberately participating in these capability transfers. Because responsibility belongs with those who created the nuclear compromises and profited from the capability sales, not those who were deceived by systematically altered authentication information," Jessica explained. "You've been carrying operational responsibility for security problems that were caused by deliberate capability betrayal, not by professional failures of nuclear judgment." As she prepared to leave the isolated contractor station for integration with the main nuclear staff, her position shifted from the back of the facility to the central coordination area, the transition of a technical specialist operating with nuclear authority rather than a contractor technician relegated to equipment maintenance. For a moment, she paused to observe the nuclear displays showing the successful penetration detection and subsequent security coordination. The nuclear staff was coordinating with accurate authentication capabilities for the first time in years. Colonel Mitchell was commanding nuclear operations with restored confidence in his authentication support. Lieutenant Colonel Davis was working to identify other potentially compromised security assessments. Chief Master Sergeant Harrison watched her from the nuclear console, his distinguished face reflecting professional respect and determination. Jessica acknowledged him with a slight nod before focusing on continued nuclear coordination. Her mission wasn't completely finished. There would be extensive counterintelligence debriefings, formal criminal investigations, and probably congressional oversight hearings. The full scope of the capability transfers to enemy forces would need to be exposed, and those responsible held accountable at every level of government and defense contracting. But the most critical part was accomplished. The truth was revealed, and nuclear operations could again proceed with confidence that authentication support was serving American interests rather than enemy forces through systematic betrayal. As nuclear operations concluded with proper authentication coordination, a security official approached. Specialist Shield, Special Agent Martinez has arranged secure facilities for your continued participation in both nuclear operations and formal counterintelligence investigation procedures. She coordinated final nuclear handoffs while remaining conscious of the eyes following her transition from isolation to integration. Nuclear staff, authentication analysts, security personnel. For 12 years, she had worked invisibly, maintaining technical competence while gathering evidence about systematic capability betrayal to enemy forces. Now she operated openly, her identity and expertise fully utilized for nuclear success rather than concealed for personal security. Chief Master Sergeant Harrison approached her before she transitioned to investigative coordination. Specialist, he said quietly, what you accomplished, maintaining nuclear effectiveness while investigating capability transfers, gathering evidence while maintaining contractor cover, revealing the truth at the critical security moment. It represents exceptional professional courage and nuclear authentication work of the highest caliber. I had obligations to my nuclear authentication unit and to operations that would be defended using compromised authentication capabilities, she replied simply. It was significantly more than professional obligation, he insisted. It was nuclear development and operational security analysis of exceptional quality under extremely difficult circumstances. Jessica allowed herself a professional smile. You provided effective training during Project Deep Shield operations, Chief. I provided nuclear procedures and authentication training, he corrected. What you demonstrated today came from exceptional personal integrity and professional dedication to protecting nuclear operations. He watched her coordinate final evidence transfer with the investigative team, then addressed Colonel Mitchell, who had joined them. Some service members never receive appropriate recognition for protecting nuclear operations, he said quietly. They simply carry the responsibility through exceptional professional performance. Colonel Mitchell nodded, observing Jessica's coordination with both nuclear and investigative personnel. And some truths require years of patient investigation to emerge and protect nuclear authentication capabilities. The morning continued as Jessica's nuclear coordination transitioned from the command center to formal counterintelligence procedures. Behind her, the nuclear staff operated with renewed confidence as nuclear operations proceeded with accurate authentication support and proper operational security. The nuclear staff worked with restored trust, knowing their capabilities would support nuclear operations without systematic compromise by enemy interests. Ahead lay the challenge of ensuring complete accountability and dismantling the entire capability transfer network responsible for systematic nuclear compromise. But for now, in this moment between concealed investigation and revealed truth, the simple act of providing accurate nuclear authentication had transformed a potentially catastrophic security breach into successful nuclear coordination. The power of one service member's quiet determination to honor fallen colleagues and protect nuclear operations, even when it required years of patient evidence gathering to expose betrayals that powerful interests had systematically concealed while profiting from capability transfers to enemy forces. As nuclear coordination concluded successfully, Jessica's secure communication system crackled with an update from Strategic Command Headquarters. All nuclear elements. This is Strategic Command. Security breach successfully contained with zero weapons compromise. Nuclear integrity restored thanks to accurate authentication coordination. Jessica closed her eyes briefly and smiled for the first time in 12 years, knowing that nuclear operations could finally proceed with confidence and proper authentication security.